Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and a special guest this week.
So yes, today we're having the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, don't get nervous, of the state of Oklahoma, the Honorable Scott Pruitt, the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, is going to come in and talk to us about what he's been doing in these last several years since he's been elected, what activities he's got going on. His office is extraordinarily busy, and we want to find out what it is he's doing and how things are going for him.
A lot of high-profile issues on his plate. Scott Pruitt, today's guest in The Verdict, and we'll be right back.
I've been fortunate enough to premiere every film that I've produced at Sundance. Seeing your film on the big screen for the first time in front of an audience at the Sundance Film Festival is unmatched. I'm Chad Burris. I'm an attorney, a film producer, film financier, economic development financier, and I'm Chickasaw. Nobody can argue that modern day media, cinema, has perpetuated this myth, this idea of the Indian and what that is. And just the idea that, all Indians look one way or all Indians act one way is a terrible injustice. Being able to have filmmakers tell stories that are representative of some element of his surroundings, his upbringing, what they know, what they see through their own eyes, that other people get a chance to bear witness to around the world. I think that's amazing. For me personally, being an Indian today means being responsible, honest, progressive, and giving that back to the community.
Learn more about today's Chickasaws at profilesofenation.com.
People have been talking about energy independence for a long time. It's always been popular, but today it's possible.
We have an enormous supply of oil and gas in the United States, much more than we thought just a few years ago.
New technology, massive new discoveries, largely made by Oklahoma companies. It literally changes everything.
And Oklahoma is leading the charge. Go watch this video to see why. Energy independence starts with us.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're really pleased to welcome back to The Verdict the Honorable Scott Pruitt, the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, who's been on with us 4 other times, so this is his 5th appearance. Scott did his undergraduate work at the University of Kentucky, where he was an athlete, the second baseman on the baseball team. He finished his undergraduate work at Georgetown. He did his law work at the University of Tulsa. He practiced law in the Tulsa area for a number of years, where he was well known for his expertise in constitutional law. He was elected to the state Senate and served 8 years in the state Senate. At the same time, while he was in the state Senate, he served 7 years as co-owner and managing general partner of the Oklahoma City Redhawks baseball team. So he is quite a man for all seasons. In 2010, he was elected Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma by a very nice, substantial margin. And he has been with us before, but we lost him for the past couple of years. We want to find out what you've been doing. We know your office is active, but just how active we'd like to find out. So welcome.
I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, welcome back. I'm finding some synergy here. If there's a position on the baseball field where people are bearing down on you and taking shots at you, it's second base.
Yeah.
And then if there's a political position where people are bearing down on you and taking shots at you, it's Attorney General. Why do you keep putting yourself in the firing line like this?
Great question there. We do deal with some very difficult cases and questions. In Oklahoma with our natural gas and oil and energy industry, we obviously have issues with the EPA that we are front and center on, and we've had several cases over the last 3 years. In fact, I argued a case in March of this year before the 10th Circuit on the Regional Haze Statute. So these cases that we're involved in are high-profile cases at times. They affect other states in a very meaningful way. But they're very important to Oklahoma. It's a joy to be there, to be able to be there to represent the folks of Oklahoma.
Well, take one and break it down for the average viewer who doesn't maybe necessarily follow it or get into the intricacies of the details.
Well, there's one case, the Regional Haze case that I'm referring to under the Clean Air Act. Back in the 1970s, Congress, in its infinite wisdom, said that if you have Class 1 federally designated areas in your state, in our state we have the Wichita Mountains, that you have to reach natural visibility by the year 2064. So that's a standard, that's objective, that Congress set in the late 1970s.
What does that mean, naturally?
Natural visibility just means that your aesthetics, the ability to see that Class 1 federally designated area is natural, as opposed to the smog that we have and the haze that we had.
Yeah.
If there are power plants that contribute to low visibility, you have to deal with it as a state. And we developed a plan in 2010 to achieve that, beat it by 15 years. Actually, in the year 2026, as I recall. But the EPA came in and said, we don't like your plan, rejected it, and so we sued the EPA to say that the state has primacy, that we have the ability to engage in cost-benefit analyses to make sure that as we meet those standards that ratepayers in the state of Oklahoma don't bear the brunt, and been involved in that case really since first quarter of 2011 after having been sworn in. So it's a case that affects the micro, is what you pay to turn on your lights and heat your home, and the macro of the energy industry and utility companies making business decisions on how to comply with environmental statutes. So it's a very, very consequential case.
Well, didn't a lot of the pollutants in our situation come from the Metroplex in Dallas?
They do,
because of the
actually.
southerly winds? So,
They do.
I mean, that's hardly our fault. I mean, that.
And you've hit on something that's very important in dealing with environmental law, and the EPA particularly, is attribution, as far as what responsibility does a state have for, whether it's safety and health related. This is not, this is aesthetics, but the science that goes behind the rule matters a lot. Oklahoma got hit for non-compliance, I think, for a county up in Wisconsin or Michigan under the cross-state air pollution rule that we challenged, that said that Oklahoma was going to have to pay $50 million for non-compliance because we kicked that county out in Michigan. We sued under that case and won, because the EPA could not prove that Oklahoma actually contributed to, from a scientific perspective, that non-compliance in Michigan. So you deal with those issues all the time, Mayor, to your point about the scientific basis behind a rule. But in this case with the regional haze, it's more about the statutory authority that the state has is that the EPA doesn't.
Well, at last count, I noted that you had approximately 80 lawyers in your office that you're saying grace over. That's a huge law firm in Oklahoma.
It is, and it's actually about maybe closer to 90 now, but 80 to 90, and it's a large firm. We have a diversity of issues, about 1,000 cases on the litigation docket representing the state, general counsel, attorneys that advise over 300 state agencies. So we have a lot of different responsibilities, criminal appeals, working with DAs and others on capital cases to defend, and to carry that appellate process out. We had an execution yesterday here in the state of Oklahoma. So we deal from criminal to civil to general counsel, a multiplicity of issues.
How do you keep it all straight? How do you keep everything docketed to make sure you're where you need to be all the time?
We have some good leaders. I mean, we have unit chiefs that head each of those divisions. I look at those unit chiefs almost like a head football coach would look at an assistant coach. I mean, you have a philosophy on how you do business. You have a philosophy on how you litigate or advise agencies, and you hire that unit chief to carry out that philosophy, but you empower them to lead that unit. And they do an extraordinarily good job. Jennifer Miller, as an example, with our criminal appeals unit, I hear often from the 10th Circuit, from the justices there, how wonderful a job Oklahoma does in defending the state's interest on those capital cases. I hear all the time from agencies at the state level about how good a job our attorneys are doing, advising them, trying to keep them out of trouble and out of court. So Ken, I think it's a matter of having good leadership in each of those units and then having a philosophy that each is seeking to incorporate.
How are we doing on water? Are you dealing with water issues?
Quite a bit. I mean, 8 months into my administration, obviously the Chickasaw lawsuit was initiated. The state of Oklahoma was sued here in the Western District of Oklahoma. We've been involved in that case since that time, obviously, working to try to mediate the case. The judge of that particular case ordered us to mediation, and we've been working hard. And both sides, I think, have handled the case very professionally. We'll see where it leads, but it's a very big case in Oklahoma's behalf. And obviously, we had the Tarrant County case. Tarrant County, out of the Dallas Metroplex, sued the state of Oklahoma under the Red River Compact, saying that they could access all of their water under the compact north of the border. We won that case 9-0, pitched a shutout there in the Supreme Court, and that's always good. It's hard to do, but we actually argued that case earlier this year and got a decision. So water, from a legal perspective, is hugely important because I see what we're doing is removing barriers. Policymakers need to have the flexibility and latitude to make decisions on how best to deal with water infrastructure, how we deal with the drought conditions west of I-35. Oklahoma City's facing some unique challenges out of that one particular piece of litigation. And so I see our role, Mayor, as being there to deal with those legal issues, to remove the barriers so the policymakers can make informed decisions and have the latitude to plan for the future.
Yeah.
And that's something we're working through.
I remember a few years ago there was a large issue with poultry farmers outside the state polluting water in northeast Oklahoma. Is that pretty much over? Are you still working
pending.
with that?
Actually, that case was litigated to its conclusion prior to me taking office. That's dealing with water quality. These other issues that I'm talking about were allocation issues with water, but that's a water quality issue, and that case is still pending before the Northern District. So we, like the plaintiffs in that case, or the defendants in that case, are waiting for the outcome from the presiding judge.
I know in the past year or so, not long after you were elected, you got deeply involved and very influentially involved in the settlement of the DHS class action case, the Children's Rights DHS case, dealing with the care of abused and deprived children in Oklahoma. How are you satisfied with how that settlement came out and how it's being handled?
With your able assistance, by the way.
Well, that's the only reason I brought it up.
You did a wonderful job helping us in that case. But I think that was a very important case because as a state we were facing the potential of having a judgment entered against the state that would force us to take certain steps that literally from a budgeting perspective could impact us for decades. And so to have some element of control on how to deal with that, the settlement we came up with, Ken, as you know, was a 3-year window where the DHS would take concrete steps to deal with certain key issues that were at issue in that case. I think that the DHS has done very, very well at making changes there. New leadership with Ed Lake. We actually, for the first time in history, the general counsel of the DHS is an assistant attorney general. That's new. And that's effective, I think, because it provides some measure of accountability with the settlement and also provides help to Ed as he's making decisions as the director. So I feel encouraged about where that's heading. The legislature appropriated a fairly sizable amount of money, I think roughly $40 million or so last year, toward the settlement to address some of the questions of getting the kids off the waiting list, getting more foster parents in the system. So I think the accountability aspect is happening with the DHS, Kent. I'm encouraged that we're not still in litigation, and we're seeing some action taken by the DHS and the legislature.
Corrections is another area of state government that seems to fall into your lap occasionally. Any cases there worth noting?
It's interesting you mentioned corrections because I think one of the areas that I'm terribly concerned about and that we're talking somewhat about of late is public safety. I mean, when you look at the I-44 corridor in the state of Oklahoma from Tulsa to Oklahoma City to Lawton had 16 homicides last year, the most that they've had since I think the early 80s, late 70s time frame. Tulsa's on track this year to eclipse its record as far as homicides. Oklahoma City, I know last year had some, bumped up against that. We're seeing, in my estimation, a spike in violent crime, and I think that we as a state need to take that more seriously. There needs to be more collaboration, more partnership from the state perspective with local law enforcement on how to work together. We're actually administering a grant program called Safe Oklahoma that the legislature established 2 years ago, $2 million of money, that and Oklahoma City has been a recipient of that you would focus on violent crime and how to prevent violent crime. And Chief City's done a great job, Mayor, at taking that money, working with code enforcement and others in certain key areas of the state, increasing patrols in those areas, and I think it's making a difference and will make a difference in the future. But public safety is a hugely important issue to our state right now.
No, we're seeing those dollars being spent wisely, and as you mentioned, last year was not a good year in a lot of those violent crime categories. It's down this year. But is there some sort of connection in this I-44 corridor? Is there some connection between the three metropolitan areas, or is it just that happens to be the road that connects the population centers?
Northeast Oklahoma has had more of a challenge with methamphetamine, the trafficking there. That's been more of an issue that's acute. So I can't say that there's one thing that drives it over another. I just think that those cities along the I-44 corridor, we've seen evidence that violence is spiking and that we need to be more intentional. One of the things that I've been concerned about at times, from a state perspective, the state policymakers don't really think they can impact it. And so the discussion at the state level is only about one thing, the corrections budget.
Yeah.
To take dollars and say we're going to put it into the area of prevention, you know, to assist law enforcement to prevent crime as opposed to just focus on incarceration, I think is a huge shift.
Yeah, that
it's
is
something that we need to continue as we go into the future from a state perspective.
Yeah, in fact, we've done some shows on that kind of shift toward how we can deal with it better at the judicial level. Our guest is Scott Pruitt. We'll be right back on The Verdict.
When you have something important to communicate, it becomes clear that there's a lot of competition for your audience's attention. So how can your message stand out and actually resonate with your audience? Legal Graphics has the answers. The team at Legal Graphics will work with you to plan, design, and even test your presentation to ensure your message will be heard and remembered. Call Legal Graphics today to schedule an appointment. The readiness is all.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers and our guest, Attorney General Scott Pruitt. You've been working a little bit on the religious liberty aspect of it. Can you explain exactly what that term means to you and the cases that you've been involved with?
Kent mentioned this earlier. I began my career in the First Amendment area, actually, and spent a bunch of my early time handling cases with the religion clauses. And I think one of the challenges we have in that area is the lack of education, awareness about what can and cannot be done. You know, there's this fear that sometimes school districts have, as an example, that if there's anything less than religious sterility, that they are exposing themselves to lawsuits and liability, and that's just not the case. And so I think a lot of times it's very helpful from my position, or for those that advise school districts or others that are in the public sphere, what can and cannot be done. You know, the use of symbols and the use of literature and the Bible's literature and the ability, you know, we've had something called equal access under the law since at the federal level since the 80s under Reagan, where groups can access the schoolhouse and engage in all forms of speech, including religious speech, in the schoolhouse. So it's a very important issue to Oklahomans, and I think at times it gets lost because of this all the controversy that you see around it, and we need more education and awareness. So what we've tried to do, Mayor, is offer some of that as part of what we are dealing with as a state to give some guidance and help to people.
And we're well aware of the national case involving Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, and what an important case, and I'm so thankful for the leadership of David Green. You all know David well. This is not, David didn't come by his religious convictions, in a Johnny-come-lately way. He's always run his company that way. And to see the government come in under the health care law and say to him that he has to conduct his business in a particular way that violates his conscience, violates his religious conviction, is the antithesis of what the First Amendment is about. So to see the Supreme Court take that case up is a very good thing. We've been involved in that case from an amicus. We filed supporting briefs on behalf of David Green and Hobby Lobby. The question that's interesting about, what the opponents say there, the Supreme Court has ruled that corporations have free speech rights under the First Amendment. It doesn't seem to me to be too much of a logical extension to say if you have free speech rights under the First Amendment, you have free exercise rights as well. And I think that's what the court will take up, and I'm hopeful that the outcome will be good.
Do you have an idea about a timetable?
Well, I think the case will be argued sometime in the first quarter. I mean, I anticipate that will occur. We're circulating now as a state. We're reaching out to other states that may join us to support Hobby Lobby's position. But I don't have a date, Kent, but I would anticipate sometime in the first quarter of next year.
So we'll have a decision probably by
June.
June,
Right.
yeah. Well, it'll be game changing no matter what it is.
It will be, and they were facing, as you all know, roughly $1.2 million a day. And to see an individual say, it's worth it to me to risk and to face that type of substantial penalty for the sake of what I believe under the First Amendment, I think accentuates the importance of the case.
Occasionally in the just kind of the daily operations of city government, I'll ask a question or something will be discussed and one of our legal staff will say, well, you could ask for an opinion from the Attorney General's office on that because they don't have an answer. And I thought, I wonder how much of your staff time is dealt with just working on opinions for people at other levels of government who just kind of want to know what the rules are, what the parameters are of a certain situation.
We meet every Wednesday. In fact, we met this morning, and people have different perspectives of what that AG opinion process is. Many think that it's just simply someone submitting a question, and I sit at my desk and
I thought I just called you up on your cell phone.
And it's a little bit more involved than that. I mean,
it doesn't work that way?
We have about 10 attorneys that get together every Wednesday, and we have these questions that comes to the conference, and it's much like an appellate process. Where we will debate and discuss and bring research, and we argue for about 3 hours every Wednesday, which is a glorious thing. But it is a very meaningful process. It's good work that we do.
Is that a process you brought in, or did you inherit that process?
It's been going on for decades. Now, we've changed it a little bit.
Yeah.
We've changed it somewhat. We actually have solicited, one of the things that I've added to the Attorney General process is we solicit view letters. So if someone submits a question, such as you, Mayor, or a representative or senator, and there's an association or others, an agency that may have a perspective, we actually solicit view letters, much like you would solicit briefs in a court case, and we take those view letters, and that's part of the file, and obviously it's something we don't lean upon, but we are getting perspective from those that live it day in and day out.
And so what are the legal ramifications of an Attorney General's opinion?
An AG opinion carries the full force of law. Agencies have to comply with an AG opinion. So if I issue an opinion and it says that an agency can conduct itself in a certain way, they have to. Now, if it's a constitutional opinion, it's advisory. So if I get asked a question about the constitutional of single subject or the debt clause, whatever, then that opinion is advisory only, and it carries the full force of law in the first instance until a court, or unless a court, overturns it.
Lest you be flooded with requests, let's make clear who is qualified to make a request.
Heads of boards and commissions and legislators.
Only.
Right.
Yes. Citizens can't as such.
That's right.
Yeah. We want to make sure.
Many do through their legislator.
Right.
But the statute, and that's not our policy. That's the statute.
This is kind of off the wall, I guess, but I wanted to ask you about a constitutional convention in Oklahoma. We are required to have one. We haven't been having them. Would you envision a constitutional convention to revamp the Oklahoma Constitution anytime soon?
There have been many that have looked at that issue, Kent, as far as the populist nature of our Constitution, the structures that it's set up. Perhaps those need to be revisited in some. I think that all those are meritorious. Arguably that occurs through the initiative petition process or through legislation that's passed by the legislature to amend or to repeal certain provisions of our Constitution. But I think a global discussion, many have been talking about that for years, that might be a healthy thing. It's not something I've looked at of late. It's not coming through the AG opinion process. So it's not something that's been forefront of my mind, but I know it's been out there and discussed quite a bit. I think the Academy a few years talked about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your services. Say anything else you want to add before we move on?
Just appreciate you all and the opportunity to be here for the 5th time.
Well,
yes.
are we going to see Scott Pruitt on a ballot again someday?
Next year, I hope. Yeah, next year.
Have you officially announced for next
We've
year?
got our committee formed, and all that's happening as we speak. But it is an honor to be serving in the capacity that I am, and I think the things that we're doing, the cases from the EPA or Affordable Care Act challenge that we have in Muskogee is literally the point of the spear. Forbes magazine did an article about 2 months ago that said that if our case is successful, the very structure of the ACA will fall. So there have been many national pundits look at what we're doing on these various cases, recognizing the impact that we're having. and it's a joy to be there to represent the folks of Oklahoma in those regards.
Scott Pruitt is the Attorney General. Kent and I'll have
all.
a final word when we get back.
Thanks.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children coming from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids gotta know they can trust you. And that's what we try to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. We are wrapping up the show with Attorney General Scott Pruitt.
Yeah, Scott's running a very efficient, very busy office out there with a lot of weighty issues to deal with all the time. We really do appreciate him giving us the time to come visit with you, our viewers.
Yeah, we threw a lot of different things at him, and he just knocked them out of the park.
Yeah, it didn't slow him down at all.
No, it didn't. He did a great job. We have website information on Scott Pruitt's office. If you'd like to get more information from the Attorney General's office, you can go to their website at oag.ok.gov. That's oag.ok.gov. And we have a website we'd love for you to visit and tell us about a guest you'd like to see or a subject that you'd like to see Kent and I discuss with someone else on a future edition of The Verdict. Our website is theverdict.tv. We'll see you next week.